Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Meridian Chamber of Commerce's Republican Primary Candidate Forum. We're so happy you could be here with us this evening. This is our second and final candidate forum for the primary election to be held May 17th. Tonight, we are speaking with candidates from Districts 21 and Districts 22. The Meridian Chamber of Commerce holds these forums during the Republican primary and during general election. And we invite all of the candidates to participate. We extend an invitation to all candidates in those Republican primaries to participate. And we're very happy to have 8 of our candidates seeking office in Districts 21 and 22 here with us tonight. We will begin with just some opening statements and introductions from each of the candidates. And we do ask them to keep that to about 2 to 3 minutes for your opening statement, and then we'll dive into the questions. Joining me tonight, helping moderate the event, is Teddy Feinberg, the editor of the Idaho Press. Teddy, welcome.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me. Thank you for everyone attending, and we're looking forward to getting the show on the road.
All right. So this is a forum. We ask you to share your viewpoints on the different subjects that we ask questions on. And as I mentioned, we're going to begin with introductions, and we'll begin down here with District 22 Representative Greg Furch.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'll just give a quick introduction. My name is Greg Furch. Currently, I'm representative for District 21, but with the magic redrawn lines, I'm now in District 22. I'm completing my first term. I've been here in Idaho for 28 years, almost to the day. I bought a chiropractic practice, and I've been doing that for nearly 30 years almost. I enjoy the outdoors and Idaho life for certain. As far as why I'm running, I think I felt the need to fill a bit of a gap. I have a great deal of educational background and clinical experience, and there seems to be a void of that in the Idaho legislature. There aren't a great deal of science-oriented individuals, and I think that's the niche that I really fill. And I think we did a pretty good job of altering the conversation or stimulating a different conversation, especially in the first 2 sessions of the Health and Welfare Committee. And I'm giving this a second round to continue that healthcare specific conversation.
Representative Vanderwaal.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for being here, and thank you to the chamber for putting this on. I'm John Vanderwaal, current in District 22A, but the current district isn't the district I had before. I used to have Meridian and Kuna. Now I got Meridian, Kuna, and Boise. So the district that they took away from me 10 years ago, they now gave back to me. And so, because I used to go all the way to Cole Road when I first ran in District 21, a long time ago. It's about 16 years ago when I first ran. I was in for 2 years, out for 2, and then I've been back in for 12. So I currently have been vice chair of health and welfare for the last 10 years. It's been a learning experience. I'm not sure I know it all. I just know it's confusing enough. They want to make sure I don't know it all. And so I've lived in the area for 42 years at the same location that I bought a dairy and moved up here in 1980, and I'm still in the house. No longer dairy, thank goodness. My son dairied for a while and lost all my retirement and his inheritance. And so I've served in the legislature. It's been a challenge and an interesting experience, and I look forward to continuing to serve in the legislature with the knowledge that I have and the background that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Vanderwaal. So District 22 candidates are experienced. our next district that we're going to have introduction from is a new district based on the redistricting here in Meridian. It is a solely Meridian district, and we have all new people seeking office for this district for the first time. So we'll begin with Mr. Ehlers, Jeff Ehlers. If you'd introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Ehlers, and I'm running for District 21B for the State House of Representatives. I'm a sixth-generation Idahoan, grew up in a small farming town, and my wife and I have lived in Meridian for quite a while now, where we're raising our 4 young kids, seventh-generation Idahoans. And we love it here. We love our great state. We love the quality of life that we have. We love the people here. It's our home. I'm also a former small business owner. I used to be a member of the chamber and appreciate the good work the chamber does. Before I sold my business, I was a member of the chamber. Former CPA, CFO, and currently head of finance for a local company here in Meridian. And I've been involved at the grassroots level of the Republican Party for almost 20 years. And I've just felt a desire to serve, and I'd love to represent the people of Meridian in the state legislature. Thank you.
Tara Pugmire, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Tara Pugmire, and I am running for District 21A. I was born here and raised here, and my husband also grew up in Meridian. We've been married nearly 25 years, and we have 5 children, 4 of which are girls, so I have become a master at conflict resolution. My husband and I started our own business, a screen print embroidery business, out of the garage of our first home 25 years ago. And we're still in business. And more importantly, we're still married. I know firsthand the challenges of owning a small business. I've experienced them ourselves. I will support and fight for businesses in Idaho. I'm also a 6th-generation Idahoan. My grandpa was a farmer from Middleton, and he was very civic-minded. It was actually some of the words that he wrote that have inspired me to be where I am today. He said, be conscious of the governmental process, and more importantly, be part of an influence in your communities. I'm not running for myself. I have no ulterior motives. And in fact, many of the things that I'm doing are contrary to my nature. I don't find it particularly fun talking about myself or my accomplishments, but I'm pushing through this part because I'm actually very excited to have an opportunity to create positive change and be able to protect our traditional conservative way of life. I'm a mom of 5. I'm a multitasker. I know how to get things done. I won't be outworked, and I do know how to bring people together. I also find a great sense of responsibility in spending other people's hard-earned money. I'm not only conservative politically, but I'm also very conservative fiscally. I am passionate about education. I recognize our schools as one of our most vital resources. I also support parents' rights to provide an individualized education that best suits their children's unique needs. I'm currently working on education legislation that will benefit all middle school and high school students. I've been fighting for your kids and my kids long before I ever decided to run for office, and I will continue to do so. One of my favorite quotes is by Martin Luther King Jr. And he said, the moment we become silent about the things, our lives begin to end at the moment we become silent about the things that matter. What's happening in our schools and in our communities does matter to me. I love Meridian. I chose to raise my family here, and I am grateful, and I don't take for granted living in a safe community. And I want Meridian to continue to be a safe place for future generations. Not only do I support, but I appreciate the work of our local law enforcement. And as Meridian continues to grow, I will support efforts in managing that growth. I am a true conservative. I'm pro-life. I am pro-Second Amendment, and I support protecting our individual rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Butterworth, you're seeking the seat for the Senate in District 21. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you to the Chamber for putting this on. My name is Thad Butterworth. I am not a native Idahoan, unfortunately. Moved here about 35 years ago, somewhere in the high school years, so you can do the math if you want. I love Idaho. When the rest of my family moved back to Oregon, where we were from, I stayed here just because I love the state so much. I love all that it has to offer. I've been involved in the political arena in a lot of behind the scenes activism and working with different groups attempting to protect liberty and to protect our constitutional freedoms. And this particular election cycle, I was not so excited to run, except for we had the unfortunate circumstance of losing all of our representatives in one shot with redistricting and then with Senator Baer retiring. I have worked with Senator Baer on several things, just talking through some issues and behind the scenes. And so when she retired, she actually gave me a call. Actually, to be quite honest, she texted me in the middle of church, and I was like, "Oh my, I've got a call to make after we're done here." But it was a great call. Between her encouragement and several others, I agreed to run for office. So, and again, like you, Tara, it's way outside of my comfort zone, but we're doing it, and I'm loving meeting all the amazing people that live here in Meridian. There's a great wealth of experience and individuals here who I think add so much to our city and our culture. My top issue really is protecting our constitutional freedoms. I believe that in many ways they are so much under attack now. And I am a small business owner. I have watched the effects of what government lockdowns and mask mandates and vaccine mandates have done to my business. I have one that's dependent on supply lines, and we have had to spend hours upon hours finding new sources for materials and finding ways we can get around wait times that, quite frankly, tend to make our customers mad and don't make us happy either. So those are one of the things that is just really important to me, is that we protect small businesses and we protect individual liberty. I forgot what I was going to say there. I had a great train of thought, but it just went out the door. Anyways, I really think that we have such an amazing opportunity in the state. We have abundant resources all over the state, from our farmland to our agriculture to our mining opportunities. We have brilliant people. Our one hang up is that we've got government that does not allow those brilliant people to use those resources to meet every challenge that Idaho faces. And that's why I'm running. I want to be the guy that helps protect those resources, allow people to use them, allow our brilliant people to come up with the solutions that will solve every issue we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. Dom Gelsomino. There you go.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Teddy and the Chamber for coordinating this. My name is Dom Gelsomino. Many of you know me as one of your Meridian Parks and Recreation Commissioners. I am also Meridian's honorary annual Christmas Grinch in the Meridian Christmas Lights Parade. I've brought smiles every year to kids from age 3 to 99 whenever the Grinch comes out. So I'm a father, I'm a family man, I'm a member of the board of directors on the Meridian Library Foundation. I've worked for state lawmakers over the last decade, and I've been involved in Idaho politics and community and public service over the last decade or more. I'm a first-generation graduate from an American college or university. I'm the son and grandson of Italian immigrants to America, and really, as the only child and grandchild, the achiever of many of my ancestors' American dream. As similarly to Mrs. Pugmire, I am also a parent of teenagers, 13 months apart, so I have also mastered the art of conflict resolution and power struggles. The reason I'm running is on top, in addition to my kids and providing for them a better future, a better education system, it's for you. It's for everyone that I've met going door to door over the last few months. and listening to them and their grievances as to what they feel we need in the state of Idaho. I'm running to provide a better future for our state, a better quality of life for its people, to strengthen our education system, our infrastructure system, and to provide true representation to the legislature for the people of District 21. Because I feel, in speaking to a lot of voters going door to door, many of them feel that they don't have a voice. Mr. Skinner out by Black Cat has said that I was the first, I was the first candidate to knock on his door in over a decade. It's time that we bring real representation and a voice to the legislature, and we need to bring some perspective and honestly some maturity to the legislature. Over the last decade, our legislature's gotten a little bit out of hand. Let's rein in and bring some mature perspective to the legislature and experienced perspective. Thank you.
Mr. Pitsky.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to the Chamber and all of your partners for hosting this event for all of us. I really appreciate all of you taking time out of your day to come listen to all of us. My name is James Petsky, and I'm running for Idaho House Seat 21A because I believe we need business-minded leaders who will hold strong to our conservative values and keep Idaho a great place to live. I grew up in a small Idaho town a couple hours from here. After that, I moved to the big city and came to Boise for Boise State University. Since then, I've spent the last 10 years building a suite of e-commerce businesses. The largest of them is called Upland Optics, which sells sporting optics for hunters. I've had a really good run of success here in Idaho, and I think a lot of that is because of the amazing place that the state is. We have a very business-friendly environment. We have great education, particularly career technical education programs, and I benefited from all of that. I can't compete with Tara and Jeff. I only have 4 generations of my family that currently live in Idaho, not quite at 6 or 7 yet. But I want to make sure that Idaho remains a great place for the future of our state. And so I'm running to make sure that happens. Thank you.
And Treg Burt, you're seeking the District 21 Senate seat as well.
That's right. Good. Very grateful for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Sean. Thank you to the Chamber. Thank you to Teddy. These forums are such a wonderful opportunity to, create and distinguish differences between those who are running. And I'm very thankful for the invite. A lot of things have transpired over the last 10, 15 years that's brought me to the point where I have decided to throw my hat in the ring and run for the Idaho State Senate in District 21. It all started when I was younger and when I was taught at an earlier age that service above self is absolutely paramount in our lives. As I've grown up, I've been involved with different volunteering opportunities, whether it's coaching baseball or soccer. In 2007, our former mayor DeVeerd, our former mayor in Meridian, appointed me to the Parks and Recreation Commission. I was a president of that. I was later appointed to to Planning and Zoning, and after that, I was elected to the Meridian City Council. This last fall, I was reelected to the Meridian City Council, and while I was knocking doors and meeting folks, it was paramount and very clear that folks have serious issues with the direction of where our state is going. In my humble opinion, those concerns have a lot to do with property tax reform, especially for seniors and those who are on fixed incomes. We need to do a lot with our education system. The way that we fund schools and our funding mechanism is very complex. I've sat down with Dr. Bob and many folks at the West Ada School District, and they sometimes have a hard time explaining how they come up with these formulas and how they get money. And when the subject matter experts have a difficult time explaining how they get money from the state, well, I think that we may have a problem, and I have solutions. And the next question is why, Treg? Why are you doing this? You're already elected to the Meridian City Council. Why do you want to be in the Senate? Well, for me, it's very simple. I love Meridian. I've lived here since 2003. I'm a lifelong Idahoan, and we have a lot of real challenges in our state, and we need real leadership. We need folks who will step up and stand for something and not be against everything. And we need folks with solutions who will have respectful dialogue, even with those who they may not agree with. And I'm not even talking about I'm not even talking about reaching across the aisle. I'm just talking about talking with friends that you may or may not agree with. And so it's for this reason why I'm running for the Idaho State Senate. I have a lot of experience. I've been a strong leader in this community for a lot of years, and I'm excited for this debate tonight because you'll see a real contrast between who we are and who we aren't. So again, thank you to the Chamber for hosting this.
Thank you all. And now I'll turn it over to Teddy to begin our questions.
Right. Start to my left with Representative Furch, and we're going to go to his left as follows. First question, what role should you play as an elected official in state government as it pertains to the business community? Floor is yours.
Wow. Certainly open-ended. I was looking through the list of priorities, and for me, just philosophically, I'm very much in favor of a fair, level, free market playing field. One of the ideas in there was balancing some of the sales tax exemptions. I've looked at that, and apparently there's 100 and some different carved out exemptions, and I would love to see a balancing or fairness applied to that. So for instance, in my office, if I have someone come in off the street and buy a cervical neck pillow, I have to charge them sales tax. But if I write a script for one of my patients and make it prescriptive, it becomes an orthopedic device, and I don't have to charge them sales tax. And so methods like that where we can find simplification. It was alluded to the complexity of, the school funding. We see that with other things. For me, I was thankful that we eliminated the personal property tax for businesses that had $100,000 or less. That affected me greatly, not necessarily on the dollar amount, because when I go through and the equipment I had in my office, the tax ended up being about $130 a year. But it took me about $300, $400 worth of time and energy to go through the inventory list and update, the fact that I bought a new monitor for this one desk and then eliminate the other monitor. So just from a business managerial point of view, we've got some mechanisms that make it really complex for people to do business. So that $100,000 elimination was huge for a lot of our businesses. I would love to see that kind of continue. Once you pay the sales tax on something the first time, I'm not certain that it's appropriate to have to rent that same piece of equipment back from the state in perpetuity. I realize there's depreciation and some of that, but just generally speaking, from a business model, I'd like to see fairness, level playing field, and the ability to compete equally in the marketplace.
It's on you now.
Okay. The governor and several people within the state are saying we're the least regulated state. Try doing a business once. My son and I bought a business that's in Meridian, and you wouldn't believe all the different regulations and hoops you have to jump through. I'm not convinced that Idaho is as business friendly as it could be. And I can give you one prime example. I mean, one of your recommendations was liquor license. Well, when we bought the store, previous owner had lost his liquor license for not paying sales tax. And so they had locked it all up. And so I had to go first to ISP and get fingerprinted and everything. And then ISP would give me a license to sell beer and wine at the convenience store. But that wasn't good enough. Then I had to go to the Department of Health and Welfare and get a permit out of the county to be able to sell beer. And each time I had to have a letter that had to be notarized along with the previous permit I got. And then when I got that, I still couldn't sell beer and wine. Then I had to go to the city, and each time I had to write a separate check to a separate organization 3 different times, get it all notarized. That's how business was being done in Idaho. And that's not business friendly. Why can't it just be one check, send it out, and they can pass it through all the different organizations and get the permit? And I finally got it on April 20th, because that's when we took over the business. On May 1, the license expired, and I had to start all over again, because they expire annually, not based on when you get one. So I think there's still a lot of different things that can be done that can make business in Idaho more friendly. I also was really frustrated when the governor can decide which businesses are essential and which ones are not. If it's my business, it's essential to me. It may not be essential to the governor, but when the governor can arbitrarily decide which businesses are essential and which ones are not, all by himself, I think we're in a very dangerous spot. So I hope we never have to go through that again, or never end up with something like that. But it's not healthy, and it's not a good way to go. Now, we were fortunate. The business we had, because we sold pet food, became essential. And I did ask the governor, I says, so bars are closed because they're not essential, but state liquor store is open. How does that match up? He said, well, we didn't want too many alcoholics going into the hospital. That kind of logic, it looks to me like, hey, I'm going to shut down the bars but I'm going to open the revenue source that the state has stayed open. So I think there's a lot of things we can do business-wise to make it streamlined and make it more efficient. But the process that we went through in these last 2 years, to me, was extremely frustrating to watch that happen, to watch a lot of people who couldn't keep their businesses going. And then we had the federal government dump a lot of money back into those businesses to keep them alive. But that's not business, that's just subsidies. And we need to be able to keep businesses open and keep Idaho business friendly.
On you, Mr. Ehlers.
Thank you. So in general, I'll start with that. I'm a conservative Republican, and so I believe in the free market, and I tend to believe that the limited government is best. I'm pro-business. I've started and sold several of my own companies, so I've lived it. I've felt the burden of some of those regulations, and what it's like to have to jump through hoops has been described. Additionally, in my business, I've also consulted with several companies where I've come in and found efficiencies, found things that needed to be automated, processes that needed to be changed, costs that could be saved. And so that's the type of attitude and mindset that I would also bring to the state legislature that I brought with business. Now, there are other things too, other regulations that we should look at. Mr. Furch described those as well, where we should analyze the cost benefit. And on some of these, the cost to the business owner, and I know it because I felt it, are higher than any sort of benefit that we're getting publicly. So we should analyze those and reevaluate those as well. And in terms of a role for the government, I think there are ways that the government can define the rules better and make sure the rules are clear for everybody so everybody can compete in a free market, understanding and playing by the same rules. Thank you.
Tara Pugmire.
Hi, thank you. As I stated before, my husband and I have been in our own own business for more than 25 years. And so I do know firsthand the challenges and struggles in owning your own business. In the last economic downturn, to keep our doors open and to keep our employees employed, we actually cashed in my husband's life insurance policy. And I'm thankful that he stayed alive and healthy to keep food on the table. So I know firsthand the challenges. In regards to echoing many of the same sentiments, I would say in regards to tax, it's fair, broad, and even, and taxes that make sense for business owners, as well as small regulations would help business owners.
Thad Butterworth.
To sound like a broken record here, but much the same thing. Honestly, government overreach and government interference in business is probably one of the biggest causes of business failure that you see in our entire state. There are so many things we could do to simplify the taxes. I know, Mr. Vanderwater, that you mentioned the sales tax or the liquor tax and some of that stuff. We constantly actually have made good friends in the tax office because we're constantly having to get definitions on difference between sales tax and use tax. Most people don't realize that's a thing, but there's a very big difference, and you have to calculate it all differently. And so there's many times we've had to call and say, okay, now how do we calculate this one? There's a lot of outdated regulations. I've just looked through some of them and went, holy cow. And you'll see some of them on some fairly funny sites, like there was something about not walking your camel down one side of the street or something like that. That's still Idaho code. It's like, why do we even have this kind of stuff? We should be looking at how we reduce those sorts of things. There is also a lot of existing regulations that are really complicated and could be simplified very easily. I think that is a proper role for the state government. I also think it's very important that we protect ourselves from federal government overreach. There are a lot of agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency, which really should serve more as an advisory role and not a governing role in our state. And the state the state legislature actually has the ability to put limits on what they can do. So those are things that are really important. We need to protect the business environment for Idahoans. We should not allow our businesses to be shuttered because we put them into places where they can't deal with the overcomplications. One of the things that's very important to me is that we look at the long-term effects of any law we pass, any regulations that's there. Is it going to satisfy an immediate need, and then down the road we're going to be dealing with complications that are going to create difficulties for business? If so, then we need to find another way to address that particular needed regulation.
Mr. Gelsomino, you're up.
Thank you. As a small business owner myself, especially in the healthcare industry, as a lifelong Republican conservative, limited government conservative, the lightest touch possible is best. We need to, of course, listen to business owners. We need to listen to businesses. We need to balance out the needs of small business and big business. We need to lower regulations. And after all that is said and done, we need to stay out of business's way. Businesses, you know how to run your business best. It should not be the government telling you how to run your business. The state legislature also, in our federalist system of and structure of government, needs to protect from those federal overreaches. But overall, listen to businesses, listen to business owners, and then stay out of their way.
On to Mr. Petsky.
Thank you. Like Jeff, I've started and sold multiple businesses, and I know about this issue a lot, and I agree. I'm going to echo a lot of the things that have already been said. The lightest touch is the best touch. We're all conservative Republicans because we believe that the government has a limited role. With that said, we are all Republicans and we're not libertarians. We believe in some government and a role for the government, not no government. We don't believe in anarchy. And I think that the most important thing that the state legislature needs to do is make sure that the government stays within the lane of the things that the government is truly good at. And also at the same time, make sure that we create a level playing field for businesses, not be giving any one business an advantage, not giving small businesses versus large businesses advantages. That's some of the most important things that I believe the state legislature needs to do for businesses. We need to keep a level playing field and make sure that we keep things, keep government in their role of what they're actually truly good at.
All great questions. Thank you, Teddy, for the fantastic question. I'm gonna say something here different. As a small business owner, I truly believe that small business is the backbone of an economy. It's literally what we do and what we rely on has everything to do with small business. We employ people, we put food on the table. And so small business is incredibly important to an economy. But first and foremost, I think that we need to listen, right? I mean, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, as politicians and as state legislators. Sometimes we think that we're way more important than we actually are. Sometimes we feel like we have all of the solutions. And I'm going to tell you what, this is what I'm going to do. And I really believe that any community needs this. I am going to, along with my future House members, we are going to meet on a quarterly basis with businesses and with families and with citizens every quarter. And not just during election season, because that seems like when everyone wants to meet the people. Let's take that photo op with a police officer, or let's get that important endorsement. It's all bull crap. I mean, it's important, but really that anyone can do that. So what I want to do is I want to meet with the citizens, all right, and the businesses of the community. And that's going to happen every quarter. And we're going to get tomatoes thrown at us, and we are going to have arrows thrown at us. But at the end of the day, that's what you guys want. That's what you guys want. That's what the citizens of Meridian want. They want business. They want us to listen. So that's what I'm going to do. We talked about, there's been a lot of talk about balanced tax policy. I believe that's really important as well. I believe that tax policy as a small business owner should be predictable. That's very important. How in the world are you expected to create a budget for your small business when tax policy changes on a yearly basis in the state legislature? It's literally impossible, And it's what's even crazier is that when the state legislature is over, all right, the legislators, and I'm not talking about all, but some, act as if they've accomplished something. As a small business owner, I'm like, hey, you've made it more confusing, in my opinion. But last but not least, we need to talk about infrastructure. Business. One of the roles of government is creating infrastructure where commerce can travel. And I will, as council president in the city of Meridian, I voted and led the charge to allocate $2.5 million. That's with an M, all right, for the construction and design of Linda Road overpass. We need that overpass. Commerce, as a small business owner in commerce in that area, we need that overpass. We need Highway 16, all right? How in the world, you go down 10 Mile and it's like a highway. It's turned into a highway, right? And so Highway 16 is going to alleviate a lot of congestion and create more business opportunities for Meridian. So those are some things that I will do as your next state senator in District 21. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Furch brought up a very good subject that we have as one of our questions that I'm going to pose to all of you. Are you aware of the numerous tax exemptions that companies and organizations get in Idaho? And what's your opinion and position on those numerous tax exemptions. Mr. Furch, I'm going to start with Representative Vanderwilde and then give you the last comment on that coming around. So thank you.
You know, we started out when they did the sales tax exemption. I think there were like 100 and some exemptions to start off with. They started off with the farmers and gave them all the exemptions they needed. And then they kept adding to it and adding to it. And then one of my first go at this is we took away a sales tax exemption from a very small group of people. And you would not believe the number of people that show up to the Capitol to protect their sales tax exemption. Everybody's in favor of getting rid of the sales tax exemption that the other guy has. So it sounds really easy. It sounds really like, oh, that should be easy. We can get rid of this one. Let's take example, the ski resort. I can guarantee you that if we tried to take the sales tax exemption away from them, they would all be down at the Capitol. Now, the rest of you wouldn't be. Nobody else would show up, but they would all be down at the Capitol to protest and argue that they still need sales tax exemption. Newspapers, same thing. So it sounds really good. It's really not all that easy to do. I agree. We need to look at it. But I think what we really need to do, besides sales tax exemption, is we need to look at where Idaho wants to be in regards to taxes. In other words, have a plan. Have a 5 or 10 year plan of taxes. I'm so sick and tired of every year. Well, let's do property tax this year. No, let's do income tax next year. We don't really have a plan of where we want to end up. So I've argued in the legislature several times, and we all know who kind of controls the issues there. And you can't get it past first base. And so I'd be more than happy to look at all the exemptions, but to pretend like that's going to be really easy. No, because every time you'll just take, and the one we tried was a really small one. It didn't affect that many people, but those 30 people showed up, and that'll happen every time. If we take it away from newspapers, you can bet that, you know, Idaho Press will show up there and say, no, I need that sales tax exemption. And I got to have that. You can't be charging me sales tax. And we say, well, why not? Well, because I like my exemptions. And I always find it very interesting when we were dealing with some of the issues on property tax and stuff like that. The farmers have probably the biggest sales tax exemption, but you tried taking that away. No, that was part of the original sales tax exemptions that they got. So they want to go back to before we added a lot. And then you'll get a charitable organization that'll come up and say, you know, with the work we do, we are really helping the government and helping the poor and all that. I should have sales tax exemption. I can't argue against that. They are doing a community service. So should they have sales tax exemption? Yeah, in a way, because they're basically providing a service that otherwise the government might have to provide. And so it's not as easy as it sounds. It's a good talking point, and everybody will be on it, but try it once, and it won't work out near as well as what you might think.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes, thank you, Representative Vanderwilde, for the history there. That's very good. In general, I think we should examine all of those things. So when you start government programs and exemptions, it's really hard to do away with them because there's always another worthy cause right next to it that's going to ask as well. So we should review those and see what makes sense. We should also be careful and cautious about adding any more. And additionally, I think it should be looked at in the broader base of overall tax examination of what the sources of revenue are for the state government, and looking at it in terms of sales tax, income tax, property taxes, see how competitive we are compared to other states where businesses and others are looking at us to move here or to move away from here. And so I think that should be part of a broader conversation as well.
Thank you. Ms. Buckmeyer?
Taxes, it's everybody's favorite thing to talk about, right? I'm not a tax expert, but I am being mentored by one. But I would say Looking at long-term effects are important, and I am definitely a proponent for incremental change, not going and just making big changes before we see the effects of those, and always for small and limited government. I don't disagree with anything anybody else said.
Mr. Butterworth.
Oh, there we go. Otherwise, I could have some fun here and make it sound like I'm still not on. Anyways, when it comes to taxes, really, the whole issue is we've got to simplify, right? Exemptions are something that adds complication to it. I would be for starting to limit and even get rid of some of those exemptions, but I know, as Mr. Vanderwater pointed out, it's going to be a battle. I think we have to really educate people on why we're doing what we're doing. They have to see the overall benefit of it. So there's a lot more I think we need to do, even from the activist side and from the and from elected official side, of educating people on this is why we want to do this. Yes, we're going to be removing this exemption, but in the end result you're going to have is a simpler tax, and you're going to be paying less in taxes than you would if we continued all these different exemptions. So it's a process. It has to be very, very strategic. As you pointed out, you're going to have a fight with just about every lobbyist that comes along when you start to say, I'm going to affect your bottom line specifically. So we just have to be very, very smart, strategic, and we have to educate the people on why this is better for them.
Thank you, Mr. Gelsomino.
Thank you, Sean. With regards to the exemptions, we need to, of course, I'm going to echo a lot of what has been said, but we need to review them on a rotation. We need to continue to attract, as the state of Idaho, we need to continue to attract businesses that provide, jobs that pay a family wage. And so, the state legislature did an opportunity program a few years ago where it was equal for existing businesses and newcomers, that they both got the same incentive. So, we can't pick winners and losers. That's not the government's job. That's not its proper role. So with regards to the exemptions, we need to review them on a 5 or 10-year rotation. We need to make sure that these businesses are generating jobs, because if they generate jobs, then there is an overall positive impact toward our state, toward our economy, and the revenue that we bring in.
Thank you, Mr. Petsky.
Thank you. This is one of my favorite topics. I have a master's degree in finance, so I totally geek out about this stuff. And I'm going to echo a lot of the same things, though, actually. I think that a lot of smart things have been brought up already. I met early on in my campaign with the Boise Valley Economic Partnership, and what that organization does is work on tax exemptions and tax incentives for companies coming in to the area. And so I'm well aware there are a ton of different exemptions, a ton of different incentives that we use to bring people into this area. And some of those things are important, but we do need to look at it and make sure that we're not picking winners and losers, like Dom just said. It's a very important thing. Make sure we're creating a level playing field and not giving any one specific company an unfair advantage. We do some of these things for a reason. And again, it's totally my area that I love to talk about and that I love to geek out about. So I'm super excited to dive into the details and look at all of these exemptions, because I believe it's something that's super important for our state, and that, will help, we can use exemptions to help grow our economy. But at the same time, we need to make sure that when we do that, we're not affecting any businesses negatively or creating any kind of unfair environment. So it's an important balance to have.
Thank you. There are some advantages to going first, especially when there are, 8 or 9 candidates saying pretty much the same thing. And so I don't have a ton to add to this discussion other than I think it's important. And I have a dear friend in the Idaho Senate who has lobbied for, I guess you could say, looking at what these exemptions look like every 5 years. I think it's really important that we do this. There's over $1 billion in our state currently where exemptions. There are over $1 billion worth of exemptions in our state currently. That's a lot of money. Let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at it and see what that looks like. See what we can do better. But at the end of the day, I think it's real simple, right? I think that we just need to make sure that it's fair and equitable for all, that we're not creating winners and losers. That's the most important thing. All right. So other than that, I don't have very much to add to the conversation. Thank you.
I kind of said my piece on that a little bit ago, but I will echo the fact that the sales tax needs to be part of a broader conversation about taxes in general. You know, much has been said about property taxes, and you know, I'm of the mindset that we need to find a path beyond property taxes. One of the things that I've kind of said somewhat in jest is when you pay your mortgage off, you shouldn't have to rent from the mosquito district in perpetuity. And so if we were to maybe find a path to shift some of that burden to sales tax, our seniors, fixed income people can control the amount of tax they pay with their spending habits. And so you can limit your taxation impact on your family budget with something like that, where you know property tax is pretty much locked in, and no matter what happens to your income, you're burdened by that no matter what. So we need to have a broader conversation. It was said that you know we're going to handle you know income tax this year, and well, we did it 2 years in a row, but I would have loved to seen a broader conversation about you know, the property tax and the sales tax exemptions, but having a game plan seems to make sense.
Your timing's impeccable. Well done. Next question. What's your solution or solutions to high property taxes facing homeowners in the state? You're up, Mr. Ehlers. Let's hear it.
Thank you for being so thoughtful.
Anytime. You're on deck.
So one of the things I'll just say is, as a former CPA, 2 master's degrees in business, master of accounting, I also love diving into the numbers and looking at this. And so I'm open to a lot of solutions, and I think we should look at the details of how they might affect the overall tax policy and how they affect families and individuals. So there's a lot of different ideas I've heard that could be open to. One is increasing the homeowner's exemption every year and maybe indexing it to inflation so it keeps going up as your home value goes up. We can also look at doing something like a rolling 5-year average. So if you have a huge spike in your home value, your property taxes don't spike as high because you look back. You'd also have to do a trigger on the down end if you hit a recession. So if it goes down, you aren't stuck paying really super high rates. I could be open also to some things that we've heard explored here too as well, which is when you've got your house paid off or maybe X number of years, looking at certain things that we could do there. So our seniors, and I'm hearing it from them on the campaign trail loud and clear when I knock on their doors, are very concerned about this. They've lived in their home for 30 years. They're now retired on a fixed income, but their property taxes keep going up. And so I think we need to also look at addressing something like that for our seniors.
Tara, you're up.
All right, thank you. I definitely don't have all the answers on this issue, but I have talked to a lot of people as well that echo those same concerns and challenges. People who've lived in their homes for 30 plus years and are retired on a fixed income, and they're being priced out of their own homes. It is an issue. I think we definitely need to look at the long-term effects of any choices and decisions that are made, and also whenever we take from one place, what's going to go up or what's going to go down. And so it just needs to be also fair for everybody. And, I'm open to looking at solutions.
Mr. Butterworth.
1, 2, 3. There we go. That happens a lot. Thank you. Actually, so the big deal with the property taxes is we have this reality of people want to move here. Idaho is such a great state. People are actually have talked to quite a few who have literally called themselves political refugees from California, Oregon, Washington. And they are, there's a lot of them that are moving into this area. And so we've got a high growth situation. It creates some real challenges, and I don't have all the answers when it comes to that. There's a lot of things that I've heard, a lot of different proposals that have been on the table. So far, I haven't heard anything that's really struck me as being the best solution yet, but I think we're going to keep working on that. I am a big fan of the circuit breaker option. Has been what it's called. It's basically that you get to a certain point, age or number of years you've lived in your house or mortgage paid off, that sort of thing, that you're there's some sort of protection there, so you're not losing your home because your taxes are continuing to get to the place where you cannot pay them anymore. So is a very, very, very complex issue, and fortunately, I have some great people that I can call on in these situations and get some good advice on. But like I said, it's something I'm still researching because I'm hearing it so much, and even, you know, my home almost tripled in value in like the 4 or 5 years I've been in it. So it's a huge issue that we're going to have to address at some point, but it'll take a little more research for that.
Mr. Butterworth, I want to add a follow-up to that and give you first opportunity on that, and then we'll come back around to everyone on this. In the recent legislative session, there was a bill to eliminate virtually all the property tax for education and municipalities and replace that with a larger sales tax. If I remember correctly, almost increasing our sales tax by 2%. Is that the right solution? How do you feel about that? And you know, is that the right path to take?
That's a good question. I did look into that bill when it came out. I had some things I was uncomfortable with in it, but I thought the general idea was potentially palatable. When I was running numbers on it, it looked like you would actually end up paying more tax, and I think we really need to reduce taxes at this point. There's the axiom that when you lower taxes, more revenue comes into the government. So I'm always very conscious of not allowing us to get to a situation where we're increasing tax, the entire tax rate. But we also have to figure out something with the property tax. So that particular bill I was not in favor of because I had some issues with it. But I would be open to something like that as long as the net result is that people are paying less in their taxes.
Mr. Gelsomino.
Thank you. So very much with what has just been said, and I'm glad Thad brought it up because I was going to bring up the same subject, is the circuit breaker. That was one of several pieces that was introduced and passed in the session, and they lowered the income requirements for that circuit breaker for the elderly and those with lower income. With taxes, it's never one silver bullet that will solve all the issues. It has to be a multi-pronged approach because it is so complicated. So as I've gone door to door meeting with voters, each has given me their own thoughts, their own opinions. One really struck me mostly because it was one that I had already started suggesting on my platform, and when I've spoken to voters, is looking into the general fund and the general surplus that we have in our general fund, and using and allocating a particular amount towards figuring out solutions and alternative solutions to lowering our property taxes. To your question, Sean, of increasing the sales tax, that's risky because it's a tax shift, and that negatively affects low-income families and non-property owners. It hasn't done a lot of good for some businesses. And I can speak to that personally because I've worked for individuals who are low-income families, and many of them are struggling. Some of them are single moms, kids who have a mental health, behavioral health illness, and they are just struggling to survive. So we cannot continue to put undue burden or overburden on low-income or non-property owners.
Mr. Petsky.
Yeah, so property taxes are the number one issue that I hear about from voters, and also, of course, the number one issue that I end up talking about. And that's because the cost of living is rising dramatically in Idaho and elsewhere, but particularly in this area. And the state government can't fix that problem by itself overnight, right? There is no solution to fix the rising cost of living that the government can do. But the one lever that the government can do something about is property taxes. If we give meaningful property tax relief, it will help with the rising cost of living. As far as the way to do that, there's a lot of different ideas out there. The sales tax one has been raising the sales tax has been talked about several times recently. I'm not a huge fan of that. I like the general principle. The problem with it is that sales tax is incredibly volatile. So if you get into a recession environment, you'd have your government revenues dropping dramatically, which could lead to serious problems for the state government. And that's not something that I'd really like to see. But if you want to really solve property taxes in the state, you need to look at what we actually use property taxes for. When we pay our property taxes, the vast majority of it goes to paying off bonds that were used to build schools. So if we want to fix the property tax issue, what we need to do is we need to fix the broken funding mechanisms that we use to build schools in the state. There's a lot of different ways. Treg's laughing because he's going to say the exact same thing. But it's a really true thing. And, there's a few different ways that we could do that. We talk about making growth pay for itself. Talk about using the general fund. The reality is that since the current system was set up, our economic environment has changed, which is why we have this massive $2 billion surplus while property taxes keep going up. So we need to look at rebalancing some of those things and maybe using that general fund money and shifting the tax burden around to pay for the building of new schools. West Ada needs 8 new schools. If we don't find a new mechanism for building new schools, our property taxes are going through the roof. So it's a really important issue. And I'm going to let Treg say the exact same things.
This isn't fair, Sean. Come on, man. Not really.
It's getting there. It's getting there.
Well, it's real simple. The legislature continues to put Band-Aids on this issue without meaningful solutions. My opponent just mentioned that he doesn't have any real solutions. And I'm going to be very specific on what my solution is with property tax reform, because as I knock doors, this is the #1 issue when it comes to the concerns of the residents of Meridian. And this is, and Mr. Petsky did steal my thunder a little bit. He's a good guy. But as you look at your property tax bills, up to 30% of your property tax bills go to West Ada, right? So if you, in the legislature is famous for creating a shift. All right. So back in 2016, they shifted property taxes, the burden of property taxes from commercial more on residential. All right. Now they're talking about eliminating property taxes. All right. Whatever. And they're wanting to increase sales tax. Well, what happens if you don't own a home? You're just paying more taxes. It makes no sense, and that's what we call the shift. And that's the reason it didn't have the time of day in discussion, real discussion in the legislature this past session. This is what I want to do. I think it's incredibly, if you want legitimate property tax decrease immediately, we need to start funding our schools, because the state of Idaho has a constitutional mandate to publicly fund our public education. And you cannot have a public education unless you have schools to learn. All right. So this is what we're going to do. All right. We're going to start funding the schools. All right. And immediately, all right, you will see that your property taxes will go down. How will we do that? All right. At the city of Meridian, I have a lot of experience with doing this. All right. We talk about it all the time. I'm the only elected official on this stage, with exception of the 2 good legislators at the very end, that have any experience with this. All right. So when you buy a new house, new growth pays for growth. When you buy a house, in the cost of that house are impact fees. All right. And they go to parks, police, fire. Those are the monies that we get. And that's the reason. And because as citizens, you expect a certain level of service, right? Yeah. So ACHD, our good friends over at the highway district, they get impact fees as well. They pay for roads. All right. That's how you get new roads. All right. Why doesn't West Ada get impact fees? All right. Because you know what they do with them? All right. At the very least, they would subsidize the cost of property taxes. Your property taxes would go down. And if you're not buying a new house, literally the only effect of this is that your property taxes go down. All right. Is there a single person in this audience right now that is against that? That's what I thought. All right. It makes sense. And I have those who say that I'm not common sense, that being a common sense conservative, all right, is something that's totally bad. I think that's pretty common sense to me. All right. Everyone in the audience is agreeing with me right now. All right. That's pretty common sense. That's exactly what I'll do. I'm extremely passionate about this. And on day one, all right, I will fight for your property taxes. I will fight to lower your property taxes. And I will do whatever I can, right, to make sure that your property taxes are decreased. Thank you.
Representative Furch, Representative Vanderawade, this is something you've seen firsthand in the House. What have you done specifically to address this issue on property taxes in your tenure?
Well, yes, we had that bill that was attempting to make a shift from the property tax to the sales tax. I was open to the concept, as always. The devil is in the details, and it was in that circumstance. One of my issues with that particular bill was the lateness of the session and the lack of opportunity to completely digest the entirety of the ramifications of it. I was a little concerned that there would be the potential to open up the door for increasing taxes on the parts that were remaining to kind of eke their way back up. With the removal of, in my case, it was about 2/3 or almost 3/4 of it. The property tax thing, I think that oftentimes gets left out of the debate, and it's been brought up at the other end of the table, is that we have to remember that in non-owner occupied properties, those owners are paying full value on the taxes. And that additional cost is reflected in the business that's conducted there, whether it's a residential rental, that additional cost for the non-owner occupied taxation has to be built into the cost of rent. If it's Albertsons or a convenience store, the non-owner occupied nature of the additional taxes has to be built into the cost of the goods and services that are sold out of that. And those are the things that everybody, including property owners, participate in. So if we were to find a way to balance the property taxes and not create a shift to commercial non-owner occupied properties, I don't think it's, if it's done correctly, I don't think it's as great a burden on the individuals as some might argue that it would be. So I'm open to a broader conversation about that. Certainly, we've got to navigate the details, but I think that alleviating or eliminating property tax, again, you shouldn't be perpetually, renting your house from the mosquito district when you pay off the mortgage.
Representative Vanderawade, your perspective.
Thank you. When that bill first came up, I thought that's a great idea. I really like it. Let me get the details. And every week I would talk to the senator who was drafting that thing. I says, where's the details? Oh, I'm almost done. Oh, I'm almost done. And it was week after week after week. And I had the same problem that Representative Furch had. It's late in session. We finally get the bill printed. And then they're still arguing about, well, we got to make some changes yet. This isn't quite right. And so it's a very complicated issue. And I think they were somewhat on the right track, but couldn't get it all put together because they were also trying to make sure that in a downturn, there had to be some reserve to keep that up. But one thing you have to realize, that property tax is dealt by county budgets. They're the ones that set the budget of what money they need, and then they assess the levy rate in order to get their income that they need to operate within the counties. And so until you have some type of restrictions or controls on that, we saw it in 2008. Your home value went down, but your property tax went up. Why? Because the counties still have to provide the services. They weren't based on the value that it would go down just because your value went down, your taxes went down. You had to end up, still paying for the county services that you were required or asking for. There's been a lot of little shots at it. I introduced a bill a couple years ago, and then I introduced it back into the property tax subcommittee that was meeting when we were out of session, which would take it, and it deals with the taxing people out of their homes. So my bill says that if you have a home, let's say it's worth $300,000, and you have 100,000 homeowners exemption, so you are being taxed at $200,000 of value. Once you turn 65, then somebody said I should do 70, but once you turn 65, then if the value of your home goes to 400, your exemption goes to another 100. In other words, your exemption increases as your value increases. So the amount you're being taxed on is still just the same amount that you had when you retired. And so you know what to figure on. You know, I'm only going to be taxed on $200,000 of value, irregardless of what the levy rate. Now, the argument I got from younger people was, well, you're shifting the taxes to the younger generation, because as you do that, then the levy rate goes up in order to get the balance that you need. So, and I understand the frustration with property tax, but I am also positive that if every one of you at every payday had to write out a check for your Social Security, you would be just as mad about your Social Security tax as you are about your property tax. Because property tax is the one thing you pay out of your own account. You don't see the Social Security that's taken out because you never get it. But if you had to every month go to the federal government and pay them their 6.5% for Social Security, you would be just as mad as that as you are about the property tax. To shift it, I think the idea that they had was in the right area, but as Representative Furch says, the devil's in the details. And anytime you start doing the details, everybody would find a hole in it somewhere that they didn't like.
So real quick follow-up, for both of you, since I did throw that question in there. How would you feel about the larger sales tax to help eliminate property tax?
Yeah, I'd want to look at it first and look at the details. As has been said, I'd like to see what the numbers do, how it shifts the burden, how big of an increase it goes, where does it go. I also think too, in general, I'm for lower taxes, right? But I also think we need to be wise stewards of the public money that we receive in the legislature. And I would want to make sure that we're not cutting the legs out from our schools by shifting this. So as Mr. Burnt has said, we need to make sure that we're taking care of our schools in whatever tax reform we're doing.
Ms. Pugmire?
I echo many of those same things. I'm concerned with any tax increase and what would the end result be, and where would the burden be placed if we were to increase those taxes. I obviously I'm very concerned about education and where the funding goes for that. I don't necessarily think that we need more funding for education, but we need to be careful about where we spend our funds. I'm fiscally responsible when it comes to that.
Okay, so next question, new school development, currently done by voted bonds. Is that the appropriate answer? Is there a better answer out there to solve this issue?
I'm not sure if there is a better answer out there to solve the issue. I know a lot of money is put into our education. More than 50% of our budget is spent on education currently. And a lot of the people I've talked to are concerned about spending more money on education, especially with the current rate of where education is going. I would call for, and I'm waiting for, fiscal transparency as well as curriculum transparency, and maybe taking a closer look at how our current system in building schools is working, and coming up with alternative solutions and being innovative in education and how we build.
You're up, Mr. Butterworth.
There we go.
Which catches us. So.
No problem. I've been a sound tech actually years ago, so I remember what it's like. So bonds are one of those issues that when people start looking at their taxes, it's something that it does affect them long term. And I like Tara, I'm very concerned about where our money is going. Currently, in our education budget, we have over 50% of it going into administrative costs. Why? Take any business and make 50% of your costs administrative, and that business won't stay open for long. It's a problem. We need to figure out where that money is going, why, and then we can look at it and say, okay, what's a good common sense solution to fund new schools? We do have to build them. I'm a little bit concerned about the bond issue because we've had bond after bond after bond, and at some point it feels like it's not necessarily the same, but at some point it feels like you're handing a teenager your credit card and saying, yeah, go have fun at the mall, and no limit. We've got to make sure that there's some accountability and responsibility with how those funds are being used. And then let's talk about what we need to actually do to increase the funding to the schools.
You're up, Mr. Gelsomino.
Thank you. So with regards to bonds and levies, there are other potential solutions. Going back to what Mr. Burnt said, looking at a state option, looking at fully funding education, which is a constitutional responsibility of the state legislature. If I'm going to quote the Constitution, it requires the state legislature to maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public, free, common schools. We can't do it if there are no schools there. So we need to continue to push for that funding. And to add on to what Mr. Burnt said is, if we are going to fully fund it at the state level, which we should be doing, we need to be able to be consistent enough to where we are ensuring that our school districts don't ever feel like, oh, well, is the state legislature going to fund education this year? If they have that confidence that the state is going to do its job every year and every session, we don't have to run bonds and levies, because what is the point of fully funding education one year, not doing it the next year, so that we're avoiding bonds and supplemental levies to be run if we're just not going to fund education? So we need to instill that confidence in our school districts. Our district in particular, in District 21, we have 16 schools, including the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine. We have a ton of schools in our district alone. And as Mr. Petsky said, we need to add more. So we need to provide state funding. The state legislature needs to be held accountable to do its constitutional responsibility.
Mr. Petsky?
Yeah, I touched on this obviously a lot in my answer to the last question, but I do think that we need to look at the school funding mechanisms that we use. Like I said, they worked when the system was first set up. They didn't create any imbalances, but the way it's currently running, we have again, a massive budget surplus, but property taxes are going up at the same time, and we have to vote in more levies to build new schools. It seems like there's something is out of whack there. And so we need to take a look at it and find a new way to do that. I think that the impact fee issue that was mentioned, I think that's a great potential helper on that. It probably isn't going to be a silver bullet to solve the issue entirely, but it can certainly be a big way to help building these 8 new schools that West Ada needs. Bonds can be part of the solution as well. The one thing positive I will say about bonds is they do allow local control. They allow the people to decide what their tax rates are going to be. That is the one really big positive about bonds. But the state does, like Mr. Gelsomino just said, have a constitutional requirement to adequately fund public education. And given the budget surplus, it makes a lot of sense to start using some of that money to make investments in the schools that we need right now.
Thank you. These are just fantastic questions. My mind is going like a million miles an hour right now. I think I was pretty clear in my last statement about where I feel about bonds and how they affect property taxes. So I'm not going to, I probably was a hair too passionate. And for those who know me the best, that tends to come out every once in a while, but I apologize. Not really. So I'm going to pivot. And honestly, I think that what we can do to emphasize and fix our educational system is career technical education. as a business owner and seeing multiple business owners in the audience right now, there is nothing more important than having a qualified workforce at graduation. I think that our public education system is doing a pretty good job academically, preparing our or students for graduation and whatever that looks like after they graduate. I believe that we need to focus more on career technical education. I recently toured some schools in the West Ada School District with Dr. Bub and Trustee Lori Frazier, my treasurer in my campaign, and we visited Meridian Middle School. And while we were there was a kid, and he had full welding gear on. I mean, he had a hat, he had on his overalls, and we were there almost toward the end of the day. And he ran up and he was shoving his way up to the front. He's like, hey, can I stay an extra 45 minutes? I need to finish my project. And he had no idea who we were. Not like we're important or anything, but he had no idea who we were. And the teacher was like, absolutely. What do you need? And he explained what he needed to do. And I saw firsthand what the career technical education system can do for our public education system. It's crucial. These kiddos are engaged. The instructors are engaged. And if we truly want to affect change, all right, in education, we need to start talking about what that looks like in the future, which is, in my humble opinion, career technical education. We need to start building more facilities throughout the state. We need to take care of our students who are in rural Idaho. And we need to, we need to start making it more, we need to come up with new policy that allows instructors who have a certification of whatever that may be to get paid the same amount as someone that has a master's education, a master's degree, all right? So that we can afford, so we can have more instructors, because that's truly the problem, all right, is the facilities and how many instructors we have, right? So if we're competitive with Boise State and other institutions, and we're able to pay instructors the way that they need to be paid, right, that's a win-win, right? These students are literally graduating from high school with 150 options. And by the way, that's pretty common sense. That's pretty common sense approach. That's what I would do.
Mr. Burnt, let me follow up a question on that. Is the legislature providing enough money for education K through 12th right now? And if you deem that they need to provide more, what's your take on, should the State Department of Education provide more or less control over those local school districts when they provide more money?
That's a great question. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to answer the question first. Thank you so much. Not 15th. So I'm on the Meridian City Council. All right. So if you're asking anyone, all right, who believes in local control, I'm the guy. All right. I absolutely believe in our school districts. They have the boots on the ground. All right. They have the boots on the ground. They know what's best, and with help and with direction, I think that you don't, first and foremost, you certainly don't want to dilute the system, right? Because like I stated earlier, the state has a constitution to publicly fund education. I'm for the best possibility and the best education for a student. All right. And I'm definitely open to discuss that and what that looks like going forward. All right. But in that process, I think it's vitally important that we don't forget about the public education system, because no matter what, most of the students are still going to be going to public education. And the more we take away from the public education, the more diluted it is. And so it's so vitally important that we don't crush the public education system as we talk about school choice. All right. And I'm not saying I'm against school choice. I'm saying in the discussion, it's really important that we don't forget about the institution that will be educating the vast majority of our students. And I believe that local control has a lot to do with that.
On to you, Representative Furch.
So I brought this up at one of the chamber morning breakfasts. My interest in furthering technical education. One of the things that's often left out of the discussion in that regard, and I believe I brought it up that morning, is if you get a technical education, usually the educational program is a bit shorter. And when folks do that, they're usually not coming out as indebted as others, and they get a head start on life. And generally, they are getting head start on paying down their mortgage, investing in IRA accounts, and so forth. They're getting the advantage of compounded interest in those accounts. And those individuals can have a wonderful quality of life by taking the time and the energy and, following those pursuits in that regard. So I agree with that. I would also like to emphasize that as a 28-year employer and probably looking at 1,000 resumes over the years, I'm very much interested in the return on investment. I've seen literally 1,000 resumes, and what I'd like to see is an emphasis on the core subjects. I had a gal in her objective. She wrote her objective was to find a job that would allow her artistic nature to be her artistic flair to be nurtured. Well, when I'm hiring someone to do a job, I'm not particularly concerned about furthering her artistic flair. And so we need to get back to the basics. And so when we do that, then we can analyze what we're funding and how we're funding it. And so if we're focusing on core things that make that person's skills, education more marketable so they can come out and contribute to the businesses that are needing their services, we might be able to find a path to easier financing. From the state level, we spend a lot of money in places that are probably leaching resources that could otherwise be used towards education. We just passed a $4 billion Medicaid budget. That's doubled in a mere 8 years, from $2 billion to $4 billion. And so from a state priority point of view, I would like to look at some of those other spending issues so that we could address what we might agree is a priority or a constitutional requirement.
Representative Vanderwater.
Thank you. Just to go back a little bit, early on when we were talking about the surplus we had, there was some discussion about taking that surplus and paying off all the bonds, all the school bonds. And I thought it was a great idea. But the problem they ran into, well, what about the districts that never bonded? They're going to get punished if we pay off all the West Ada bonds, but the Melba has never done a bond, so they don't get any of the money. And so there was some discussion on that. I still think it's a good idea if we have a big surplus again to look at that, because I think that will in some way provide property tax relief. When you can actually pay off, if the state would take the surplus and pay off the bonds, but how to make that equal to a fair and equal education for everybody, that makes it a little more difficult again. We do have a budget stabilization. We do also, that's for education, and we do also have a fund for school districts that come into disrepair and not being able to pass a bond, that the state then steps in and helps put that together. So we do have some options on that. Now, as far as funding for schools, I've long been an advocate of send the schools the money and let them decide how to spend it. Because if you look at it, what Melba needs may be different than what Riley needs, or maybe different than what Burley needs. And too often, I think we put money into a pot, and then the districts decide, hey, I'd like to access that money. And so I will start this program so that I can access this extra $3 million or $30 million. And because I would like to have that money, not I've got $3 million that I would rather use somewhere else, because that's where the needs are. Every school district is different. Every community is different. And I think all their needs are different. And we're trying to make every school district fund on the same formula. I would rather that we just send the money in a lump sum to the schools and let them decide how it gets spent, because I don't know what Burley needs. How would I know as a legislature what Burley needs? How would I know what Twin Falls needs? How would I may know what West Ada needs. That's part of my district, but I have 3 districts. I have Cuna, West Ada, and Boise. Their needs may be different in each one of those. So how do I fund it and send them all the same amount of money for the same projects, when maybe Boise has a different need than what West Ada does or what Cuna does? And so I would rather that we just lump sum, send the money. You've got this many students, that you decide how to spend it, and then let the general public decide whether you're spending it properly or not. How much money? I've often asked, people say, well, we got to properly fund schools. It's the constitutional requirement. I want somebody to tell me how much that is, and then I can deal with it, because I find out that it doesn't make any difference how much I send. It's never enough. In other words, somebody tell me what the amount is in your vision or your thing of that's properly funded, and then we can deal with that. But that number never has showed up in all the years I've been there. We just kind of divide up. I sat on JFAC for a while, the appropriations for 2 years. And we always said education was our number one priority. And then we set the budget last. That makes no sense to me. If I have my number one priority, that's the first budget I set, and not public television. I'm not going to badmouth public television, but that's usually the first budget that always got set in JFAC. And education was the last, and it kind of got set by what do we have left? They kind of put it there. They put a marker out there for how much, but it gets set at last. I think it should be set first if it's your number one priority, because maybe the $100 million or $100,000 that you put in that first budget you passed was better used in education. Maybe you had a better chance of doing that. And I could go into the whole process of setting budgets, and it's more convoluted than what it sounds.
Mr. Ehlers.
Thank you. So a lot of good things have been said on this subject. I'll just add my approach. So I do take fiscal responsibility very seriously, and I also take our constitutional responsibility to our schools very seriously. And so on this matter, I would certainly listen to the stakeholders in this. Parents, I want to hear from you on this, right? You have students at schools. Let's hear what's best from students, administrators, teachers, others, and the different stakeholders in this. And I think I've proven myself as one that can learn quickly, and I would dive into this matter as well. And I've talked to a lot of employers. I've done technology startups as an entrepreneur, and I'm hearing out here locally this need for a workforce and how shortage we have in some of these technical fields and science fields and other things like that. And so I think we really need to be innovative around that and make sure we're doing what's best for our students, but also giving them an Idaho education that matches an Idaho workforce for our future.
Thank you, Ms. Pugmire. I want to give you an opportunity to answer my follow-up. Should State Department of Education provide more or less control over the local school districts?
I would say probably less control, but I want to talk a little bit about the trades. And I do think that our school districts are doing a good job in regards to technical training. I think the dialogue around college education and career paths with parents need to change. That career apprenticeships and technical trades are worthy career options as well. I have been working on a bill that passed last session. It's entitled the Extended Learning Opportunities. It's a great path towards exactly what we're talking here. It allows for high school, middle school students to receive credits for learning done outside of the classroom. And receive actual school credits for that. So that can be in the form of apprenticeships, on-the-job training, and this is exactly what we're talking about in preparing our kids for career paths and technical trades. And I think it's a very worthy and important bill, but it just takes people to pick that up and move it forward.
Thank you. Mr. Butterworth, the question is, should the State Department of Education provide more or less control over the local school districts?
You're good. I do believe it should provide less. Like Mr. Vanderwater was pointing out, the fact is that, you know, every school district is going to have different needs. Every school is going to have different needs. I have actually spent my high school years over in Payette, a pretty rural area, and completely different from what I have observed that we need in the Boise and Meridian areas. You know, there's just a lot of variation there where local control is better. So yeah, from my standpoint, definitely less control.
Mr. Gelsomino?
Thank you, Sean. I'm a local control guy. Like many of others of the candidates up here. As a parent, you know, my son wants to be an architect. My daughter wants to be a vet tech. So for me, growing up in the public education system, I was very fortunate that I had incredible educators. Many of them became as close as family. In my family, I was the first to go to college, so there was a very symbolic aspect to it, along with other aspects. And having graduated from Boise State with my bachelor's, debt-free as well, thanks to both my parents and I all working to pay out of pocket, make sure we didn't pull any loans, making sure that we walked out of college debt-free. My kids will tell you I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm old-fashioned. I keep the receipts. I log it down in a pen and paper ledger, and that's how I manage the finances in our household. So, you know, we need to ensure that schools, much like Mr. Butterworth and Representative Vanderwater said, each school district, each school is different. We cannot have an umbrella policy because each will be different. It's just like each of our students are different. You can't have a top-down system because each student learns differently.
Okay. Mr. Petsky, the question specifically, should the State Department of Education provide more or less control over local school districts?
Yeah, I'm a fan of local control as well. Definitely believe that, you know, specifically because of Idaho's wide diversity in the sizes of our districts. You know, I grew up in a town of 6,000, currently live in an area here with almost 600,000, and there's areas in Idaho that have 60. So we do need to have local control that, you know, treats each of those districts differently. As far as the career technical education stuff, you know, that's been talked about a lot on this question. Like, I totally agree. And, you know, that's something that the state is doing a lot about and really pushing. I know Clay Long really well. He's the director of the career technical education program. He and I talked about it. The state right now is literally giving them more money than they know what to do with. They cannot spend it at the state level. It's a little bit different at the local level, like what Mr. Burnt said earlier. You know, West Ada hasn't, you know, allocated it in the same exact way. But the state level CTE programs are fantastic, and that is the one area where I do hope that the state continues to push and to continue to allocate more funding.
Well, excellent. Well, you've all been very good Republicans because the Republican Party has always stood by the fact that local government and local control is the best way to operate. Now I'm going to ask you a question to see if you really hold up to that. One of the legislative priorities that we've had at the Meridian Chamber for a long time is local option tax. So should that be opened up to all cities and communities, because it is available to some communities in our state right now, and should local city governments, or more importantly, the local citizens that have to vote for that local option tax, should they be trusted with it? And if so, why is that not an option right now in our state? We're going to begin with Mr. Butterworth.
Good. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Just want to. Actually, this is an interesting question because it is the one place where I'll tell you I am not in favor of the local option tax, and that's largely because of the fact that already we've got a complicated tax system, and we will just be adding more burden to the citizens of each of our cities that enacts these sort of things. It's also it puts an undue burden on businesses. So if Meridian decides to enact a bunch of local option taxes, and I've got my business is actually in another city nearby, my competitors here may lose out on business because they can come over to where I'm at and not have to pay those same taxes. So I understand the local control option. I understand I want as much control as possible over that, but currently the mechanisms that we have in this state for taxes would make that something I wouldn't support.
Mr. Gilmasino.
Thank you, Sean. So when we talk about this local option tax, it's also almost a question of, do we trust our cities? Do we trust our citizens? And personally, I believe that we can't really do it one city at a time or at a city level. I believe it could be done at a 1 to 2 county level. But as you mentioned, in certain areas, we do have communities that do have local option taxes. Doing some research, Sun Valley actually has the highest right now, sitting at 9%. That's including the Idaho sales tax. So with regards to that, it's the people's choice, and that's what's important. We need to trust our people. Now, because there's no debt involved, we don't need to do that 2/3 majority vote. A simple majority can vote on it. And much like a lot of voter initiated ballot measures, initiatives, we need to trust our people that, that they can do the right thing and they know how to govern themselves, our communities, and what can be best for our communities and our cities.
So I grew up in Haley, which is 12 miles south of Sun Valley. So I know a little bit about this from firsthand experience. I'll tell you two things. Paying the sales tax in Sun Valley sucks. It's 9% and it sucks. And the schools up there are awesome. I will say that. And, it's because of the people there made that decision to do that. And, I'm a fan of local control. Like I said, this issue is a bit thorny because it does create the problems that Mr. Butterworth mentioned of having businesses struggling to compete across the borders. So if we're going to do opening up the local option tax to all cities and all municipalities, we need to make sure that we do it in a way where we don't end up like a California or a Utah, where we have every single area has its own different tax structure and people are trying to game the system and go across the border to buy different things. We don't want to end up like that. So if we're going to do this, we need to make sure that we do it in a way where there's a tough bar to pass for people to implement these, or for voters to implement these local option taxes. So that's the biggest thing to me. Make sure that there's a tough hurdle, but it should be possible. There should be a way to do it. My honest opinion, I don't think that they would pass in a lot of the areas in Idaho. I don't think it would actually be an issue. The reason that it happens in Sun Valley is because it's a Democrat stronghold. It's one of the few in the state. But here in Meridian, I don't think our voters would pass one. So honestly, I'm not too concerned about it if the state does give us that option, because I don't think it would pass. So, you got to also think about that. And it's a very complicated issue, but it's an important one because, like you said, it's a local control issue, and the state needs to take a step back and say, okay, we're going to let the municipalities and the voters in those municipalities make the decisions that affect them personally.
Thank you. All great comments. No, full transparency. I'm on the Meridian City Council, and so I'm all for local control. I actually believe that there's some advantages to local option. If you look at, again, I'm a small business owner, and one of the roles of government is, transportation and making sure that we have availability for commerce on our roads. And one of the things that local option can provide is infrastructure. And when I knock doors, this is probably top three concerns that people have: the congestion on the roads. And honestly, at the end of the day, the district does a great job. And when I say the district, I mean the Ada County Highway District, to clarify. I think that they do as good of a job as they can with the type of funds that they have. All right. Our roads are phenomenal. All right. I think they do a really good job maintaining our roads. And at the city of Meridian, we have a strong relationship with the district, but they're underfunded. At the end of the day, they just don't have all of the resources to be able to provide what our community needs. And so it's like local option to be able to offer to the citizens, hey, do you want to spend X amount of dollars on these roads? All right. And it will increase your property tax bill X amount. It's full transparency. There's no moving the ball in this. It's full transparency. And at the end of the day, the voter has the right to be able to say, heck yeah, I want that. I vote yes. Or no, I really am not in a position to be, where I want to raise my property taxes. But at the end of the day, the voter has the right to be able to decide for themselves. Now, there's some complexities to it, and we get to the good legislators at the end of the table. They'll probably provide some more perspective on what it's like at a state level. I don't have that. All right. But at a local level, I think that it's something that we need to look at, because I think there's at least a discussion, right? Because I think that there could be a lot of benefit from it if we do it the right way. So those are my thoughts. On to you,
Mr.
Representative Furch.
Let's go sounding tepidly incongruent. There definitely are challenges with local option taxing. Let's ask the merchants in Fruitland if they feel they're on a level playing field with Walmart in Ontario. And that kind of is the nutshell challenge for it. If a hotel is built on the other side of Victory in the county, they can outcompete a similar hotel in Boise or Meridian. They're at an economic advantage. And so we got to be mindful of that core premise to have a level playing field, economic fairness. And when we start getting into patchworks of tax policies and tax rates, up in Haley, it's more of an isolated area where you're limited in your shopping options. But in a place like Fruitland, it's a few-minute drive across the border to avoid taxation altogether. And so I do understand the notion and largely support, local control, but in this particular situation, it seems like we could create quite a quagmire that unlevels the playing field for a lot of our merchants.
Representative Van der Wadding.
Thank you. Being a good Republican, I would be no against the local option tax. I appreciated you telling us we were good Republicans. So I'm going to stick to that one. And I think, the taxing authority, I think, belongs to the state. And I think to make a patchwork of all different taxing districts, if I'm on this side of the street or that side of the street, becomes a lot more confusing and a lot more detrimental to business in Idaho. And you have stated before, you want to be business friendly. So adding another tax to a business, is that business friendly? And, we've talked about, you haven't mentioned it, I think, today yet, but we've talked about, super majorities. When would the local option tax be allowed on the ballot? Would it be only in November? Maybe it gets a little more legs then. I'm not sure it gets mine, but I think there needs a lot more control before any of that moves in that direction.
Thank you. Mr. Ehlers?
Yeah, thank you. So, local control and education, yes. On this, there's another competing Republican principle, which is also fiscal responsibility and having fair and simple taxes. And this doesn't seem to make it any more simple. It seems to be more complex. And I'd have to look at the different mechanisms that would go into something like local control, as we've talked about hurdles and whatnot. I'd also ask, what are we trying to fund by having these additional taxes at the local level? And are there other mechanisms that we can fund that? Usage fees or other things. I'd want to investigate those as well and look at all the tools that are available to help fund needed programs. One thing that really influences me is just my experience with this as a small business owner. So even though my companies have been in Idaho, because of a few years ago, the Supreme Court ruled in what's called the Wayfair ruling, which really complicated interstate sales tax. Our business in Idaho ended up having to pay sales tax in the state of Washington. And depending in Seattle, which side of the street you lived on, it could be a 10%, but just down the road could be 11 or 12, or in that county it was 9. And it created a fair amount of burden as a small business owner to be able to understand that. So that's something else that influences my experience and thoughts around this.
Mrs. Pugmire?
I echo the same sentiments that have been commented over the last few comments. I think it's a very complicated tax issue, and I wouldn't want to create an undue burden on businesses. And it feels like it would create an unlevel playing field as well. Our area here is different from a rural, secluded area, and I can't support it for our area here.
All right. Well, we are running long. All of you have given some great answers and some great feedback. So in our last 10 minutes that we have here, we're going to allow you to make some closing statements. I would ask you to try and keep it to about 2 minutes. And we'll begin back here with Mr. Furch.
Well, once again, I'd like to thank the Chamber for the opportunity. And I'd just like to kind of reiterate my experience a little bit when it comes to this particular race. I've been very involved in the party politic. I've held a number of positions in the Republican Party. I've been Ada County Chair. I've served a great deal in those roles. Outside of that, I believe I have a unique experience that really doesn't exist. And especially now with the retirement of Dr. Wood, there really doesn't appear to be anybody else that has a scientific, clinical, multi-decade experience in a niche that is really, really important right now. And if the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's that being mindful of science, healthcare policy, and those conversations is vitally important. It's having an enormous impact on people's lives, their livelihoods, being, their jobs literally are being held in the balance based on healthcare policies. And I really do believe that in that subject matter, I'm kind of the unicorn in the state legislature, and I'm going to ask that we get another round at that. Thank you.
Mr. Representative Vanderwater.
I'd also like to thank the Chamber for putting on this forum. I do believe that I bring the experience and the leadership that has been in the legislature. I do have a voting record. You can see where I vote for all these years. I believe I'm consistent, straightforward, and honest. I do bring the type of leadership I think that the legislature needs. We're going to end up with maybe 35 new House members with no experience, or maybe some of them that are coming back with a little bit experience. So I think it's going to take a lot of guidance and working with people. I work with people on both sides of the aisle. Some of my good friends are on the other side. I don't mind that they're wrong sometimes. But I always say there's 105 good people in the legislature. Some of them just have bad ideas. They're not bad people. They just sometimes they're just not really good ideas. But I believe that I can work with all sections. When I came back into the legislature after 2 years, I ran as caucus chair. And the reason I ran as caucus chair then was that we were splitting in the Republican Party. We were divided and fighting each other because we couldn't find enough Democrats to fight with. So we fought with each other. And I took over as caucus chair. I believe I smoothed that back out. I got it to where we were kind of on the right path. I think we're heading a little bit in that direction now. And I would like to see us reverse that and get more civil in our discussions and in how we conduct business. And because there is no wrong discussion. Everybody has a point of view, and it's always worth listening to. You don't have to agree with it. I mean, my daughter serves in the Senate, and it's been helpful for me because we can kind of balance. We serve on different committees, so we kind of know everything that's going on, except for the tax part of it. But I always say that my daughter doesn't agree with me all the time. I'll be married for 50 years in August. My wife still doesn't agree with me all the time. So I don't expect everybody in the legislature to agree with me. But I do think we do have to have the courtesy of listening to each other and trying to find the right solutions. I've always tried to work for what I think are the right solutions. I know Governor Otter, before we did Medicaid expansion, had some plans of how to avoid Medicaid expansion. And I tried to work with them. I never quite got what I was looking out of that one. And so, but I've always been willing to listen and to work with people to try to solve the issues in Idaho.
Thank you. Mr. Ehlers.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Thank you for hosting this. Thank you to those that are going to be watching this later. If you have a second screen, you can pause your video right now. You can look me up at Jeff Ehlers. Hopefully that didn't get recorded for everybody watching at home. You can pause and look me up at jeffahlers4idaho.com. I'm doing this because I love this great state of Idaho. I love my 4 kids that are going to grow up here. And I want the same high quality of life and freedoms and Idaho values that we enjoy for the next generation. And so if you're living in District 21, I'd ask for your vote on May 17th. Again, Jeff Ehlers. Thank you.
Ms. Pugmire.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for this evening's opportunity to be able to get together and talk about the things that we hold most dear. I'm here today really running for this office. It really started in education for me, recognizing some of the things that were going on in schools and recognizing a need for change and protecting our children. My core values are faith, family, and freedom. And I truly believe that faith is a cornerstone on which we build strong families, and strong families help build strong communities, and strong communities help create and build a stronger Idaho. And that is why I'm here, to help protect our personal freedoms and help keep Idaho a place where my children can raise their families in someday.
Thank you. Mr. Butterworth.
You know, nobody ever notices the sound tech until something goes wrong. So thank you. I want to say you've done a great job most of the night. And thank you to the chamber and everybody who's here. I am excited to be running because I believe that there's constitutional conservative principles that need to be represented by for the people of the District 21. I'm finding it's a very conservative district. It's it's a great stronghold for conservative values, and I want to represent that in our state Senate. I am firmly entrenched in the idea that, as I said earlier, we have amazing resources, we have brilliant people, we just need to get government out of the way and let the people succeed. And I'm asking for your vote on May 17th as well.
Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. Mr. Gelsomino.
Thank you, and thank you so much for everybody who attended, who's watching live. Teddy, wonderful moderation. I mean, shoot, you should moderate the presidential debates. You'd probably handle them pretty easily. I'm running because I believe experience matters. And the experience and leadership that I bring to my race has been proven through results over the years of my involvement in the community and state, whether it's on the Parks Commission and having negotiated a $7,000 grant from Intermountain Pet Hospital for one of our for an amenity at one of our new dog parks here in Meridian out of Discovery Park, whether it's bringing people together in consensus, and it's seen in the broad coalition of support I've received since announcing. But it's also experience and leadership that is relevant, and you need for me to be prepared, uniquely prepared to get the work done of the people of this district, of District 21 and of the state of Idaho starting day one. I'm running to give my kids a better future where they have clean air and clean water to breathe and drink, a great education so that they can succeed and become the successful people that they would like to be someday. And because I believe that you, the people of Idaho, deserve better from your legislature.
Thank you. Mr. Petsky.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, and thank you to the Chamber and for everybody who's been here tonight and is watching online for coming and listening, because it's a hugely important thing. This election that's coming up is important for a lot of reasons. I don't have enough time to get into all of them, but especially in this district where we have 3 open seats, so we're choosing brand new legislators. And I'll save you my bio and my experience and the things that I'm running on. You can find all that at petskyforidaho.com. What I do want to leave you with, and the one thing that I would ask you to consider when you go to the polls, is that politics should be about public service. That's the most important thing. I've been knocking on doors since January and talking to voters. And when I do that, I don't give a spiel. I ask one simple question: what are your concerns for the state? I'm not the candidate that talks the most or has the most signs, but the one thing that I do believe that I've done in this election is I've listened more than anybody else. And that's why I'm asking for your votes on May 17th. Thank you all.
And Mr. Byrne.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been great. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Teddy. Thank you, staff at the Meridian Chamber. It takes a lot of courage, in my opinion, to get up here on a dais and to share your thoughts and opinions, even when there are people in the audience that may or may not disagree. And at the end of I do this every Tuesday night at the Meridian City Council. And, my local experience, in my opinion, is crucial and very vital in the Idaho State Senate, because I've learned what it's like to be accessible. I believe that local government is all about listening to the residents, because we're the closest form of government to you, right? And so I've learned what it's like, and I know why it's so important to listen. I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian. I'm a family man. I'm a small business owner. And at the end of the day, I love Meridian. What can I say? Meridian is such a fantastic place to live. It's a wonderful place to do business, and it's a great community to live and work. And as your next state senator in District 21, I want to continue with these ideals that I've spoke about tonight. I'm Treg Burnt, and I ask for your vote on May 17th. Thank you.
We appreciate everybody coming out. Thank you all for answering the questions. Thanks for everybody in attendance for coming out. And just don't forget to vote May 17th in this critical primary election. Thank you all.
Thank you all.